you're prepared to join in debate, sure, anybody can join, but just give me a moment. Just give me a moment. But anyways, as I was saying, there's a group of people that are going around saying that women are required to veil, and they're required to veil at all times. An argument can be made that a woman should veil when they pray at their local church or when they're prophesying at their local church, but there is not a single scripture in all of the Bible, nor in the dual canonical books, where it states that a woman must veil at all times. Now, if it is your conviction to veil, veil. If it is your conviction to go on the
Yes.
streets and dress as you wish, then do what you got to do. But early church tradition is not a necessary thing. In other words, just because the early church did something culturally one way, it doesn't mean that it's prescribed for all people everywhere at all times to do it.
Testing, testing, testing. Maybe a little
Women
louder.
veiled in the early
Maybe a little
church
louder.
times, very beautiful.
Louder, louder,
As
louder.
long as they're
Yada da
not
dee da
dressing
da
in a
do da dee.
particular
Yeah,
way
that should be
that's
good.
seducing men or anything like that, there's no issue with a woman deciding not to veil, as long as they're not dressing like a prostitute. Okay? So, why am I doing this stream? Because although I can concede that there's a biblical passage that suggests that a woman should veil while they're praying, and that a woman should veil, okay, um, in their local church, by the way, there is not a single scripture in all of the Bible that says a woman should be veiling at all times, everywhere. It does not exist. It's just not there. So, since this is not there, if it's not there, I don't know how these people are coming to their conclusions unless they have to believe that everything the early church did and everything that the early church believes is mandatory for everybody else everywhere to believe and do. It means every tradition, every little thing that they believed or what have you, they'd have to do. So you have to demonstrate to me in the Bible. If it's not in the Bible, I don't give a dang. So we're gonna have to go through scriptures, okay? We're gonna have to go through scriptures, and you're gonna have to show me in the scriptures, okay? Once again, I admit I'm a fair man, that in the context of your church, it is up for debate. A woman may have to actually veil if they're praying, or if they're prophesying. If a woman is not praying and if a woman is not prophesying, they do not have to veil. Okay? So that's the main argument at hand. Now, before I send the stream out, I want my first guest to come in, and that's gonna be Brian. So Brian, I sent you the StreamYard. You'll be the first guest, and then I'll have people come in periodically. But that is my stance. Okay? Sure. If you're gonna show me that in the Bible, women have to veil at all times everywhere as a command, then you've won me over. But if you're gonna start coming here saying church tradition this, church tradition that, miss me with that. It's not gonna work. So you'll have to go back to your Discord cults that you guys are running down there. Which I'm pretty much hearing. I mean, people are coming to me that those things are getting pretty rough and ugly down there. So that's what I'm hearing. But again, and Alex, even yourself, Alex, I would like to hope that you don't believe women have to veil 24/7 outside of church or anything like that. As far as I'm concerned, Alex, you believe women have to veil inside of their local fellowship. If I'm not mistaken, all right, if I'm not mistaken. But you don't require a woman to veil in the train station or in the streets or at a schoolyard or at their job, right? Like As far as I'm concerned, I don't believe that's your worldview. So if you think that I'm speaking about veiling as in, no, I get that. That's up for debate. But what I'm speaking about is when people say you have to veil 24/7 everywhere in public. And I believe that's not biblical. Brian, where you at, brother? I sent you the link. Okay. So you're saying that you don't require it, God does. Okay, that's very concerning. Okay. So I'd like to be shown in the Bible where a woman is required to veil everywhere they go. Okay? Okay, my brother, that's what I'm talking about, Alex. There's a group of people that are saying that women need to veil 24/7. Not I get it. The local membership, the local church, I'll grant that. Forget that. For the sake of argument, let's just say that in the church you have to veil. Let's just leave it there. Okay, let's leave it there. That's not what I'm arguing here today. I get that that's a very controversial subject. I get it. But I'm not talking about that. No, brother, there's a group of Christians that are going around saying that women have to veil at all times. So yeah. So yeah. Um, you know. Now again, Melly, there's no problem with this, right? There's no problem. Melly said that she grew up in a church where the woman had to wear veils. That's not a problem, right? If that's where you grew up, that's your culture, it is what it is. But when you tell somebody they have to veil at all times, everywhere, 24/7, the train station, McDonald's, your job, walking down the block and getting a soda, that's when it gets very, very, very cultish. That's cultish. It's cultish. Um and Brian is nowhere to be seen. I think he's running for his life. So I guess I'll put this here and just have people join at the order they receive. Uh Brian is probably being told by his cult leaders not to join. So yeah, because you gotta call this how it is. You know what I'm saying? Anytime you condemn somebody or anything like that, and this is the link. Anytime you condemn somebody and tell them, oh, they're this, they're that, they're a prostitute because they don't wear veils everywhere, you have to show up with Bible. You have to show up with Bible. Okay? So you have to bring Bible and you have to show Bible. If you don't have Bible, um, then that's an issue. Okay? Yes, sir. Everywhere you go, there are people saying that you have to wear a veil. So it's very simple. It's very simple. All of these people from the early church gang, whatever you call them, the early church community, all of these people, right? Early church gang, whatever the heck you guys call each other. Feel free to come up and show me in the Bible where a woman is to veil 24/7. Okay? All right, that's where I need to know. Okay? Brian ran for his life. No one knows where he is. All right, he's probably hoping his leader holds him down, and that's okay. Understood. Understood. Yeah. So understood. Um. No, we're here. We're here. All right, we're waiting. This guy will definitely be coming in, and I'd like to be proven otherwise. I really do. I would really want to be proven otherwise. I want to be proven how there is a woman or anything in the Bible that suggests that a man, or I should say, a woman, has to veil 24/7. Okay, 24/7. All right. And I really hope that we don't get. Let's
Loody
not
doody
hope that these
da.
people bring up Moses, right? Because we know Moses had to cover his face because of his glory, and then they take that out of context, and I hope we don't. I hope let's hope they don't mention Moses, right? Let's hope that they don't mention
Da da
Moses
da
or
da da.
anything like that, right?
Testing. It's
Let's
not
hope that they
working. Oh,
bring
it
me
is
to the
working.
scripture, and if they're gonna bring early church, then you've barbecued yourself, because I don't think the early church is. I don't think the early church was perfect, nor do I
Bible
believe
tells us.
that. All right, so here we are. We have Mr. Luke here. Luke, I've heard you say some harsh things to women that decide not to veil or or go against this particular country.
I see. Did I say something? Did I say something sinful?
I would say that you've said some choice words. I would say that, but since I'm here and you're here, Luke, why don't you show me in the Bible where it says that women are to be veiled everywhere, not just in their local fellowship where they're praying and prophesying. And even that's up for debate, but for the sake of argument, I'll grant that premise and I'll say, show me where it says everywhere.
Sure. You mind if I give just an intro so they understand what we actually believe? Because we've been misrepresented a little bit, JP, even by you.
All right. I'll give you literally a minute, so spit it out in a minute.
Okay. Well, first of all, we believe whatever the early church believes. That's what our group is all about. Is just living out the practices of the early Christians. And it would be silly to say that a woman needs to be veiled 24/7. That means she's even veiling when she's sleeping, when she's showering, when she's giving birth, or any other things that would be completely absurd. But God told women to veil in public so that they don't cause other men to fall into sin by lusting after them.
No,
And
yeah, yeah, just to be very clear, I don't mean 24/7 as in their sleep. So, but carry on.
right, 24/7 would imply that, and that would just be crazy, though. Early church never taught that. Early church just said when you're outdoors, you got to do it.
Yeah, obviously I was being a little sarcastic, right? There are going to be times where you can't actually literally veil. So,
Well, I mean, you could. I mean, if God really commanded that, or if somebody thought God commanded that, and they were really devout, then they would literally wear a veil at,
even
you
in the
know,
shower?
yeah. I mean, I saw somebody say that online. There's this website called the Head Covering Movement, and I can't tell if they're being serious or not, but they're like, we're developing this new clothing line, and they said something like that about.
No, yeah, yeah. Let's not split hairs here, and
Yeah. Anyway, JP, you said you give me a minute, but you did cut me off after a minute. That's not fair.
all right. So no, yeah. No, just because you're obviously we all know not 24/7. It's a little ridiculous,
Yes.
brother. So
JP, if I can show you, even though you are going to go by the Bible alone, if I can show you that even people all around the world did this for thousands of years, I think you'll probably let up being so harsh, and you'll really just have an issue with us calling a woman a harlot if she shows off her face. And it's even worse if she wears makeup. That's what the church always taught us, that is harlotry to wear makeup, and that's how the whole world viewed women who wear makeup, even until like about 150 years ago. If you lived in the old west and you went to a saloon, everybody knew that the women in saloons wore makeup, wore scant clothing, and they were always referred to as painted girls, because a woman who wears makeup is trying to attract lovers. She's trying to attract people to lust after her. And women are not allowed to wear makeup. The early church agrees that the whole practice of wearing makeup was invented by the fallen angels. So makeup and uncovering the face are indecent and compared to harlotry. Thank you for my minute.
all right.
Let me send you
So
a link. I'm going to send you a link, and this is where all of our scripture quotes are.
okay. Well, brother, before we go there, because this isn't we're not doing a research paper together right now. We're having a conversation. So where would you say, because I do not believe that the Bible tells us to do everything that the early church did. So if the early church decided to veil, that's okay for the early church, but the Bible doesn't command it. So where in the Bible does it command for women to veil everywhere at all times?
Are you sure you don't want the link, JP, just so you can have all the scriptures sitting in front of you? Because it's a lot. It's a huge list. And I've got to post it somewhere. How are we going to put it on the screen? Do you want me to share screens?
Yeah, you could post it on your private chat. Go ahead.
Okay.
Post it on the
Right
private chat.
here on the right is the link. And
Okay.
shall I share screen so I can go over the scriptures? Because we got to have it on the screen.
Okay, no worries. I'll share the screens. I'll share the screen. Okay.
Well, it's a huge document as you're about to see. It's
All
probably
right.
better
No worries.
if I share
No
so
worries.
that I can.
I got it. I got it. I
Okay.
got it.
At the top
Okay.
it says a short preview. Those are some of the church fathers, not all of them, just some of the
Okay.
earliest one, talking about the fact that a veil is referring to a face veil, and some of them talk about how adamant they are about women veiling, and that's exactly what Paul is referring to when he says women should veil the face.
Okay. Wait a minute. So what you're telling me is that when Paul says a woman should veil her face, he was referencing these people.
No.
Okay. So when you said that Paul was talking about a woman should veil his her face, you're saying that this these quotes would complement Paul?
Well, they're all referring to the same practice. Yes, this was an unbroken practice for thousands of years, both before Paul and after
Sure,
Paul.
sure. But did Paul not give a particular context to when a woman should veil?
Yeah, he does give a particular context. He gives four reasons why women should veil. Do you know those four reasons, or do you want me to go over them?
Sure, he says why a woman should veil, but that's in the context of the church. So let's do this instead of pulling up a bunch of quotes from early church fathers who are not in the scripture, because I pretty much said
Well, the
that
scriptures are after that. You have to scroll a little bit more, JP. That's why you should
I
hand me the reins.
no, no, no. I hear what you're saying, right? These are the early church fathers. I
Yeah,
hear you there, right? These are the early
yeah.
church
Scroll
fathers.
down to the scriptures. They're right below it.
Okay, cool. So let's go to Corinthians. Okay, let's go to
Yes,
Corinthians.
yes.
All right. These are some Old Testament scriptures, right? But
Mm-hmm.
these are not commands to the
Let's start with First
people.
Corinthians. It is a command. Do you believe it's a command for women to veil themselves?
No, I do not believe it's a
Okay.
command for
Wait.
women to
Put it
veil
back on the
themselves.
screen, JP. What am I even doing here if you're not going to keep it on the screen?
Brother, I'm gonna pull up the passage on a Bible Gateway app. So we'll pull it up that way. Okay.
All right.
So I'm gonna pull up First
All right.
Corinthians.
And JP, if you want to do this again sometime, you can, but I do have to leave in about 1 hour to pick up a brother who's coming down here in an
No
airplane.
worries.
So,
No worries.
yeah.
Okay.
But I really am happy to do it again.
No worries. No worries. I'm not too enthusiastic about veils and all that, but
Well,
give me a
it's
second.
enough for you to talk about it, JP, and I'm not crazy. Let me give you a little let me just tell you what I'm going to show you. It's something that not only Paul commands, and I can prove to you that Paul is talking about a veil, a face veil, from the Old Testament, which uses the same Greek word if we're going by the Greek Septuagint, and the whole church always used the Greek Septuagint. So we can see that Paul is using the same word. It's the word kata Kata means coming down, and calypto means hide. It means conceal or cover up.
Mm-hmm.
Calypto is where we get the word apocalypse. And apo means from, and calypse means hide. So it just means, taking away from, taking the covering off, revealing it. That's where we get the word revelation. So
Mm-hmm.
it literally means to take away the covering. So calypto means hiding or covering. So Paul says a woman should be kata calypto. That means covered down, from the head down, hanging. It's talking about a hanging curtain. And this word occurs in Greek writings for hundreds of years. I've traced it up to about 700 years before Christ. The Greeks who owned the Greek language, JP, they use this word and they use variations of it.
Brother, this all sounds very beautiful, but we gotta go verse by verse, and we'll go break by break, right? Well, it's not shotgun. So now we're at the verse, okay? So let me break this down, and then I'll allow you to respond. I'll read it, and then after I read it, we could both have a dialogue on it, okay? Because I know
Cool.
you want to shotgun a bunch of things and points and bring this
I
back.
do. I've got so much evidence, it's crazy.
And I hear what you're saying, but we got to go point by point and then spend time on those points. Anybody can shotgun a million things. For example, you mentioned this. You go look at the verse. I go very beautiful. Now let's dissect the verse and go to the verse bit by bit. So, the context of Corinthians, Paul is writing to the church. What does he say? Now I commend you because you remember me in everything and maintain the traditions even as I deliver them to you. But I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of a wife is her husband, and the head of Christ is God. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors God, but every wife who prays and prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head, since it is the same as if her head were shaven. For if a wife will not cover her head, then she should cut her hair short. But since it is disgraceful for a wife to cut off her hair or shave her head, let her cover her head. For a man ought to not cover his head, since he is the image and the glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. For man was not made for woman, but woman for man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. That is why a wife, a woman, right? Obviously, some translations, if we go to the
Yeah, it's a
KJV,
woman.
yeah, but whatever. That is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority over on her head because of the angels. Nevertheless, in the Lord, the woman is not independent of a man, nor a man of woman. For as a woman was made from man, so man is no born of woman. All these things are from God. Judge for yourselves. It is proper for a wife to pray to God with her head uncovered. That is not nature itself teaching you, but if a man wears long hair, it's disgraceful for him. But if a woman has long hair, it is her glory, for her hair is given to her for a covering. If anyone is inclined to be contentious, we have no such practice, nor the churches of God.
Amen.
All right, amen. So, what's the context, right? This is a letter to a church. And what is it addressing? It's saying that when a woman is to pray and prophesy, her head is to be covered. So there's a command here, and the command is covering when you're praying or when you're prophesying. So that's the command,
No, it isn't.
praying and prophesying. So suppose a woman is in the streets and they're not praying and prophesying. Why would she have to cover her hair?
I'll explain to you, JP. I could give you some example sentences, but the way you understand this is not the way not only all Christians in the first centuries, but literally all Christians throughout the entire Reformation era, all Protestants up until the late 1800s. Not one of them understood this verse the way you
Brother,
did.
brother, stop appealing to other men. You're talking to me.
No,
I'm
I will
reading
appeal to
the
them.
text. Brother,
Paul
I'm
appeals to
reading.
men.
Hold on, brother. I'm reading the text for what it says. If you're gonna run to the early church, brother, you have no spine, my brother.
JP,
You're as
does
bad
Paul appeal to the other churches?
brother. I'm here. I'm reading the text.
Does
Read
Paul
for
appeal to the other
yourself.
churches?
I'm brother. I'm here. Read for
If you're
yourself.
here, then answer the question, JP. Does
Okay.
Paul
So
appeal to the
Luke,
custom of the other
so
churches?
Luke, I'm asking you a question. I'm asking you, not the early
Yes. Okay,
church, not
I'll
anybody.
tell you what it means.
Okay, no. You're not telling me this. There's two commands here. A woman is to cover her head if she is praying and if she is
Does Paul
prophesying.
say that?
That's what it says
No. Paul
verbatim.
never said that. That
Okay,
sentence is not there. You just made up that
okay,
sentence. Paul never
okay,
said a woman is to veil her head if she is praying or prophesying. He never says that.
okay.
He says
So
she may not be unveiled while she's praying or prophesying. And that is the big misunderstanding here that you have. You think that if Paul is saying a woman should not be taking off her veil at praying and prophesying, well, that means that's the only time to wear it. But in reality, in the context here, if you have the historical background of what women in Corinth were doing, you understand they had a practice of taking off their face veils, which they were already wearing, or taking it off when they're praying and prophesying because they had this crazy tradition that went back hundreds of years. They worship
okay,
yeah, go ahead.
okay. So let's read this again. Let's read this one more time then. Okay. So
I've
when
read
it
it a million
says,
times.
what does it say? Yeah, what does it say in regarding to when a woman prophesies, right? It says this: every wife who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. Okay? So let's
Yes.
stick with that right there.
Yes.
How does a woman dishonor her head? If she prays or prophesies with her head uncovered.
Yes.
Okay?
This word covered is referring to a veil. She has unveiled
Correct.
herself. He's saying you
Correct.
are not allowed to be unveiled here.
Okay. If she does those things, she's dishonoring.
Yes.
If
Now,
she
now,
does
what does
those things.
unveil mean? Do you know what that word means in in the Greek, JP?
Yeah, brother, if she doesn't have a veil and
It
she
means,
does those
yeah.
things.
Yes.
Yes, correct.
Specifically, it means she's taken off her veil. It's implying she
Correct.
already had a veil on when she came into the church.
Sure, because when you're in the church, you are to be veiled. Correct.
Right.
But but if you uncover, you are disgracing yourself by doing those things. But why didn't Paul say if you uncover yourself any point at any time
Good
you're
question.
sinning?
Good question.
Why
You'll
does he
find
talk
that.
about
You'll
these
find that
two
as you keep
particular
going.
things?
You'll find that as you keep reading.
Okay. No, I kept reading. It doesn't say that a
Well, I'll
woman
tell
has
you.
to be
I'll tell you
covered
if you
that
can't
whole
find
time.
it.
Okay, go ahead. So tell me.
He says that the man is the head of the woman. And
Okay.
he says the way that you know a man is the head of the woman is because woman wasn't made first, man was. And man didn't come from woman, but woman was made out of the man. So for these two reasons, he is called the head of the woman. And
Okay.
elsewhere in First Timothy, he says that she is to be subject, and he refers to similar reasons, such as the
Okay.
fact that the woman was made for the man, not the man for the woman, and the fact that she was first deceived, and she is to be subject, he says, and it says she is to be silent, as it also says in the law, he says. So Paul is referring to the Old Testament and says that women are to be subject, just like in the Old Testament law. And Peter also in 1 Peter 3 says that women are to adorn themselves like the holy women of old, who
Wait a
called
minute.
their
Slow
husbands
down. Okay.
Lord.
Got it. Slow down. Slow down. Okay. Got it. All right. So you didn't answer my question. Okay. Because that's not what the text is saying. Okay. The text is dealing with a church issue, right? And primarily here, it tells you, if we read down 10 to 15 or down to 16, it tells you it says a wife ought to have a symbol of authority in her head because of the angels. Nevertheless, in the Lord, the woman is not independent of man, and man of woman. For as woman was made from man, so man is now born of woman. All things from God. Judge for yourself as is proper for a wife to pray to God with her head uncovered. So again, it makes the emphasis of prayer. Does nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, it is disgrace for him? But if a woman has long hair, it is her glory, for her hair is given to her as a covering.
Right.
So
Let me
again,
give you a different perspective, JP. You're reading it one way. I'm going to tell you the way I'm reading it, which,
brother,
of
I'm
course,
not.
I got from the
I'm.
early
Let me.
church.
Okay, I'm fair. I'm gonna say this, and I'll let you go. The text is condemning two actions: praying and prophesying without your head covered.
Right. I agree with
And if
that.
you continue to read, it makes the emphasis on why a woman is ought to pray with their head covered. This is in the context of a church. Now, what
Oh,
you
yeah,
need
I
to
agree.
show me is that this is saying that at all times, woman must be head covered, and it doesn't say it. All it's saying is you're out of order if you pray or you prophesy with your head, very nasty, with your head
Oh,
not
excuse me. I'm
covered.
sorry. I need to change my microphone. I meant to mute myself. I'm sorry.
All good, all good.
I was an accident. I actually muted myself. I'm sorry, guys. I'm very gassy in these conversations. Excuse me, guys. I really did. Look, I've got a mute button. I've been using it the whole time. Blue and
It's all
excuse
good,
me,
man.
guys.
It's all good.
I thought I was muted. I'd never mute in front. I'd never burp like that. I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm sorry, JP. You continue.
No, yeah, I'm pretty much finished with that. So again, as I was saying, there's two instructions here when a woman ought to head cover. Um, so that's that. I would like you to show me where this means that you have to head cover yourself at all times.
Okay, well, it connects with the reason that Paul gives in the beginning that a man is the head of his wife. So this is really talking about a woman's relationship with her husband, that she ought not to do things that are disgraceful to her husband when she's with her husband in church. And
Hmm.
the only reason that a woman would leave and be with her husband somewhere is if they're going to church. That's where women go with their husbands, they go to church together. So that's the context. That is women being in assemblies. That's why at the very end he says, if anybody's inclined to be contentious, we have no such practice, nor do the churches of God. And when he says church, he's talking about assemblies. He's talking about groups of Christian believers who are getting together. So it is talking about in public. It's not talking about in private, because your husband is not even there with you in private when you're praying. This is the early church's teaching. This is talking about public settings, and it's saying a woman ought to have authority on her head. It doesn't say a symbol of authority. In the Greek, it just says a woman ought to have authority on her head. And again, this is connecting to her being subject to her husband. And this is according to natural law. The woman was not made first, the man was. And she was made for the man, she was made out of the man. So for that reason, she is subject to the man. Do you see why these are not specific to culture?
Okay, very good,
These reasons that he's giving are according to
very
God's
good, brother,
natural
very good.
design.
Very good. Thank you for that. Again, brother, you're very good, Luke. And I'm pretty sure that when it comes to Discord, you're probably very, very good. But unfortunately, Luke, you're not addressing my question. My question is very, very clear. This text is giving two stipulations in which a woman should have their head covered, but it's not saying that you have to have your head covered at all times. Then, when I ask you that, you take leaps all over the place. You go early church, early this. You say the context is this, the context is that. When I'm reading the text for what it says, you see, I don't need 400 years of early church to read a text for what
JP,
it
why don't you let me
says.
finish reading? You've cut me off before I've finished explaining.
Okay,
I'm explaining each verse for you.
but brother, I can't have you go an hour. So what? How long do you need?
Wait,
How long
well,
do
I
you
only
need?
had an hour, but just let me finish reading the verse. It's not
Okay,
going to
so
take an
how long do
hour.
you need? Tell me 2, 3 minutes. Give me some
It's
time.
not going to take an hour. How long have we been going? Just we haven't even been going barely 30 minutes. Come
Sure,
on.
but Luke, I can't have you go on a
Okay,
like
it's
on a
literally the next verse, JP. I mean, you got to be more patient than
what I'm
that.
saying. Would you like a minute, 2 minutes? How much would you like? Just
You've done
tell me.
most
Give
of
me
the
time.
talking. You've done most of the talking. Come
Okay,
on.
so
I'm not
what would
taking
you?
up all the time.
Okay, well, would you like 2 minutes, 3 minutes? What would you want?
I'm just going to read the next verse. I don't know how long it's going to take. Listen,
Okay,
Paul
I'll give
makes
you
it
two
clear to you.
minutes.
God
I'll
makes
give
it
you 2 minutes.
he makes it very clear now that this is a law that transcends any specific culture. It goes back to the Old Testament. It goes back to all time because he says, "Judge for yourselves." He's telling you, this is obvious. You don't even need me to say it. It's obvious, JP, and everybody listening. Is it proper for a wife to pray to God or a woman to pray to God with her head unveiled, with her veil taken off? Doesn't nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, it's a disgrace to him, but if a woman has long hair, it's her glory because her hair was given to her for a covering? And all the fathers say, and all the Jews in Jewish history say, hair is an indication, long hair on a woman is a natural indication that a woman should veil herself, including her face. So all cultures around the world understood that. It's natural. If you don't understand that, JP, you're not natural. You have a perverted mindset. You don't understand why a woman was given long hair. You think it's just for her to make up and deck out and look pretty. But people used to understand long hair is a covering that a woman uses. It's a natural veil that she can make use of.
You have 1 more minute, brother. I gave you two.
Yes, and then Paul says, but if anybody wants to debate with us about this, go look at what the practice of all the churches is. And notice at the beginning, he says that this is actually a tradition of the church. He says, I commend you for keeping to the traditions, but you either skipped something I taught you in the beginning or you just weren't listening. So this is one of the traditions. It's veiling. It's a tradition that goes back before he sent this letter. It's a very old tradition, goes back to Jewish culture and the entire world. That's why he appeals to nature, because all people around the world were doing it. And now you need to look and see what the worldwide custom was, because Jesus and Paul do appeal to worldwide custom. Jesus tells you, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you'll never enter heaven. And all the Jews for thousands of years were veiling their women. Do I still have time?
You have 15 seconds. Go ahead.
Yeah, in Numbers it says that if a woman is caught in adultery, that the priest is to take the veil from her head. How could that command be carried out in Israel unless all women were veiled?
All right, very good. Thank you. I have 2 minutes now to speak without any interruption. After 2 minutes, I'll allow you to speak. I think it's better that way. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. All right. All right. I just started my time. 2 minutes. All right. So, everybody, notice that Luke read the text and pretty much twisted the text to say the opposite. The text is clear. Throughout that culture, throughout that time, two things are true. When a woman is to pray, they are to cover their heads. And when a woman is to prophesy, they are to cover their heads. And if a man grows his hair long, he is a disgrace. These are three things, excuse me, that this text is saying. But it is not saying that a woman must veil at all times, everywhere, because if they do not, they're in sin, similarly to how they would be in sin if they don't veil when they pray and when they prophesy. It's what the text says, word for word. Now, last but not least, we got 1 minute left for me, myself. 1 minute left. 1 minute left. My contention is this: I need a text that says that you must veil at all times, and then it say that if you do not veil at all times, you are sinning, such as if you don't veil when you pray, and such as if you don't veil when you're prophesying. That's what I need to see. Did Jews veil? Absolutely. Was that a part of their culture? Absolutely. But Gentiles, right? Gentiles. I want to see a text that says that Gentile women must veil at all times, and that does not exist. What we have is some people in the early church, and that's very beautiful, but the early church doesn't make the rules. We go by what the Bible says, and the Bible here is not saying that women must veil at all times 24/7. That's my time. You got 2 minutes.
Thank you, JP. So, do you think that this is? Can I do a little cross examination? Do you believe that this is a cultural custom then, just specific to Corinth, or specific only to Gentiles, or what? What is it?
I believe that veiling was a cultural thing regarding the Jews. However, this right here is universal. Where if someone goes to church and they're going to pray and prophesy, they should veil. And that's the command here. If you don't do that, you're disgraceful. However, wearing a veil 24/7, that is not a commandment.
I see. Do you mind if I use my time just to do a dialogue with you?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's way more productive, JP. To a certain degree, we each need to have our own time to present something, but we should also be able to do some cross examination. So
No, go ahead.
we have
Cross
each
examine.
other's
You
position.
got two
This
minutes.
is
Go ahead.
all about modesty. This is the early church's view. It's also the Jewish view. Um, so you agree that in order to understand words in the Bible, like in order to even have an interlinear, you need to have words that have occurred in lots of books over many centuries in order to know how that word is used, right?
I would say that it depends on the particular context. Something as clear as this, right, where it's telling you literally sentence structure. I'm not going to poke out a word and then go at a random text in the Bible and say, haha, see, it means this here, so it must mean this here, and then reject the context, such as what we just read in the chapter, where it condemns people if they don't do either action.
Okay, well, you said something as clear as this. So do you think this word then occurs a lot in the New Testament?
I would say that I don't think it's of relevance given that I'm reading this passage and I'm reading the context of
Well,
this
I'll
passage.
answer the question as it deserves to be answered. No,
Mm.
this word kata kaluma in regard to a woman's veil does not occur in the New Testament very much. It only occurs a couple of times, mostly in this chapter right here. But we do know what kaluma means, or we do know what calypso means,
Okay, go ahead.
and it means hidden. It occurs many times in the Old Testament and the New Testament. So, right off the bat, I mean, you have to admit that Protestant women today are not following this command. They must have forgotten at least the definition of this word, if not also the entire custom surrounding it. Calypto means hidden. No women are hiding their heads today. They think this means a doily on the back of their head. That is crazy. Or they
One
think
minute.
that their hair needs to be covered. Again, that is not in the scriptures either. I'm saying this for the sake of the audience because some people, JP, are more convicted than you are to cover their heads, but they just don't know what kind of a covering this is. But calypto means hidden. The women in the Old Testament hid their heads. When Paul is telling them that they need to keep their veils on, he is not saying wear something less than what you're normally wearing. He's speaking to Greek women who were already veiled from head to toe. Their faces were already covered, but they were imitating the practices of the Greeks. I can show not only the church fathers saying that for centuries, but I can show all Protestant reformers, even the founders of denominations saying that from the 1500s to the late 1800s. So, yeah, we do have to refer to culture
10
and to history.
seconds.
Yeah, we do have to refer to how these words are used. We can see that in Greece and in all the surrounding regions, pretty much the entire civilized world, they were veiling women's faces. So,
All
no,
right, that's your time.
Paul's not doing anything new.
All right. Well, the discussion of this is not, and listen, I'm a fair man. I think that women covering their heads during prayer and prophesying, I think that that's something that should be further looked into. But that's not what I'm having a discussion on here today. Because there are people in this very chat, such as this man right here, Brother Alex, who believes that women ought to be veiled when they're in church regarding prayer and prophecy. So I agree that that is something that should be looked into. But what I'm saying is that it is not biblical where you would have to tell it is not biblical to tell a woman that they have to veil everywhere they go. You know what I'm saying? For example, if a woman decides to walk to the grocery store and they don't have a veil on, that's not a sin. So I just don't think that's up for debate. What's up for debate is whether they veil or not, at church during prophecy and during prayer. That's up for debate, right? Like, I'm not going to debate that. The text is clear, right? But what is not up for debate is a woman going down the store to the grocery store and their hair is showing, right? I mean, if that causes you to stumble and causes you to sin, I mean, you're a sick pervert. You feel me? That's my time.
Do you know what this word, when Paul says that her hair is given to her for a covering, you know what that word is in Greek, or have you studied that at all? It's actually a different word from the veil. It's a word that means a piece of clothing, a shawl, or a shroud, a wrap that a woman has. So Paul says this is a natural part of a woman's clothing. And the early church understood this to mean that God has clothed man and woman with distinct features for their sex. Men have beards, women have long hair. And of course, a man could desecrate his beard and cut it off, or a woman could shave off her head, but this would be an abomination. And in ancient times, both the Jews and the Christians considered it to be exchange of garments. If a man either shaves off his beard, they see him as effeminate, and if a woman were to cut off her hair, she also would be effeminate, or she would be acting masculine. She would be exchanging garments with the man. And you know, JP, that in the Old Testament, God calls that an abomination to exchange clothing. So this is natural clothing that God has given us, key distinctions for man and woman. So it is according to nature. The worst sins that humans can commit are sins against nature. And you can see the society we live in now, where the women, none of them are submitting to their husbands anymore. They're going off to work, they're sending their kids to school. Divorce rate is skyrocketing. Women are running around pretty much naked. They've got leggings and things on, skin tight. You can see all their whole bodies, and they've got all their makeup on. Women are prostitutes, JP, and everybody watching this should ask themselves, how did this happen? And if they go to the late 1800s, around the time of the Industrial Revolution, they'll see when the world became decadent and luxurious, fashion and clothing styles changed radically. Women stopped wearing dresses, and if you go back just a little before that, you see all women used to veil their faces in public. And this is the unbroken tradition. This is according to nature. Again, Paul says, judge according to nature, judge for yourself. Doesn't nature teach you this? And by saying nature, he is also telling you to look at
Eight
what the entire
seconds.
world is practicing. So we do look at what the entire world is practicing. Jesus says, if you do what the Gentiles do, what the heathen do, what credit is that
That's
to you?
time. All right. Thank you for that. Now, Luke did bring up some excellent points, and let me just respond to these points real quick. Number one, I don't give a darn, just me personally, what the Old Testament commands for women, because I'm not under the Old Covenant and I'm not a Jew. I'm a Gentile under the New Covenant, grafted in Romans chapter 11. So, since we're not under the Old Covenant and we're under the New Covenant and we're grafted in, the rules of the Old Covenant don't apply to us in the New Covenant, grafted in Romans chapter 11. I'm a Gentile. Now, secondly, I say this. Um, yes, Luke, I understand you're coming from a sincere place. So I'm not going to sit here and trash you down and say you're a trash human, because you are coming from a sincere place. But there has to be a level of balance. I can't go around saying that all women are prostitutes if they decide to wear jeans. Now, one can make an argument and say that jeans are a male's creation, but there are woman jeans that are distinct from male jeans. So I wouldn't say that a woman that's wearing jeans is wearing men's clothing, because they're distinct from one another. For example, if I wore woman jeans, I'd look like a gender. You know what I'm saying? I'd look like a transformer. So, even there, right? So, what I would simply say is this: I understand that there were customs, I understand that there are rules, but the Bible nowhere commends Gentiles, right, to have to dress in the way that old Jewish people dressed in the Old Testament under the Old Covenant. It's just not there. Now, I understand, I got 20 seconds left. I understand your passion. I understand your passion, and I understand that um, in 2025, women are dressing in a particular way that doesn't honor God. And I also understand that there are women that are not submitting to their husbands. But I believe that there needs to be a balance. And I think that you're going too far, my brother. That's my 2 minutes. Go ahead, brother. You got 2 minutes.
And so you think I'm going too far, but why don't you be more specific, JP? You think the whole church is going too far, and you think that everyone was going too far
Are you asking
until
me a
the
question, or
$1800s.
are
Uh,
you asking me a question, or are you
yeah,
just making
I
a
want you to acknowledge that. And all you can really say is, well, You can either say I don't care, or you can say show me the evidence. Which one are you going
No,
to say?
yeah, I'm going to say this. If the early church as a whole decided that women ought to veil, and they all decided as a community that we're going to veil, that's very beautiful. But today, we have the church today. We have Pentecostals, right? We have non-denominations. We have Messianic Jews. We have a bunch of bevy of Gentile churches that have together come together, and they have come to the conclusion of what is appropriate and not appropriate. For example, this sister right here is married to a pastor, who I'm friends with, and the pastor oversees his sheep. And I'm pretty sure that if there's somebody in his church that's a little bit out of order, they'd figure out a way to speak to that congregant. But if the congregant is dressed in such a way where they're not half naked, there's no issue with that biblically.
As long as they're not half naked, then there's no issue with that. Is that what you just said?
Brother, okay, so if they're wearing, let me put it to you this way. Let me look something up here online. Hold on.
I
Modest
have a
woman.
lot of questions for you.
No, absolutely, brother. Absolutely. And
JP,
Luke,
do
I
you?
am enjoying Luke, I am enjoying this conversation. I don't think
It's better than you're expecting, isn't it?
no, absolutely, brother. Absolutely.
JP, do you think that the modesty standards are slipping gradually over time?
No, I agree.
Well, okay,
Yes,
let me
brother.
just ask a few questions. Let me ask a few questions. Do you
Okay,
think
hold on.
that the modesty standards are slipping? Oh man, don't subject me to this, please.
All
Uh,
right, no worries.
if
Hold
you
on, hold on.
if do you agree that they're slipping gradually and that the women don't realize it? Do you think a lot of people just don't even realize what modesty is, or whether there even is an objective standard for modesty?
Is there an objective standard for
Yeah,
modesty? I
do you
would have.
think there is one?
Yeah, I think that. Okay, so look,
Let
these
me ask you a
people.
better question. Let me ask you a way better question. God in the Old Testament says that men and women are not allowed to exchange dress. Do you believe that law is still binding?
I would say that men and women are not allowed. Yeah, I would say that if because you want to be what you identify as. You feel me? So, for example, I wouldn't wear a dress because I'm a man and I'm going contrary to God's design of what He made me to be.
Okay. In 1 Timothy 2, Paul says that the women are to be silent in the church, just as the law also says. So is Paul referring to the Old Covenant law when he's laying down that rule?
Give me a second. Give me 1 second. What verse, brother?
Let me pull it up here. 1 Timothy 2.
To what?
I'm pulling it up here. Let's see here. Are to be in subjection, just as the law also says.
Okay. First of all, I heard.
This is actually 1 Corinthians 14. 1
Oh,
Corinthians 14:34. You can go ahead and read that out.
13.
1 Corinthians 14:34. 14:34.
For God is not a God of confusion, but of peace, as in all of the churches of the saints, and women should keep silent in churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but should be in submission, as the law also says. If there is anything, so the law says that they should be in submission, and Paul also says that they should be in submission.
Mm-hmm. So can I
Yeah,
ask you a question?
yeah, go ahead.
Where does the law say that women should be in submission?
Where does the law say that women should be under submission?
Yes. If
I
you
don't
if you know the verse, um, you'll have to send it to me sometimes because I don't know where that verse is. But do you know what we do see in the Old Testament
know.
law and the first 5 books of the Bible? We see women being silent, calling their husbands my lord, like Sarah,
Mm-hmm.
and we see them veiled. That is
Okay.
submission. And
Yeah.
yeah,
So
there you go.
carry on.
Well,
No,
in
carry
First
on.
Peter 3, you did contradict First Peter 3. Paul says, or Peter says in First Peter 3, if you could jump over to real quick.
Okay. All right. We're gonna go back to this. Okay. So
Okay.
we'll go back to.
Okay.
Okay. All right. First Peter what?
First Peter 3,
Okay.
just you can read through verse 6 if you want to read it.
All right. Likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by their conduct of their wives. When they see you respect and pure conduct, do not let your adorning be external, the braiding of hair, putting on jewelry, or clothing you wear, but let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable beauty of a gentle, quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. For this is how the holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves by submitting to their own husbands. As Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, and you are her child, if you do good and do not fear anything that is frightening. Okay.
You see that he says women ought to adorn themselves like the holy women in former times.
Mm.
Did you see that?
Brother, remember when you first came on my channel and you were debating Chris and you were saying, I agree with that. I agree with that too. I agree with all that, Chris. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like you, brother. I agree with all this. You know what I'm saying? I
Cool.
agree
And
with
I
that.
did agree with Chris. I
No,
was
yeah. So,
flabbergasted at that guy. I
yeah.
just had a massive debate with him where he says Jesus isn't omnipotent, and he completely switches it around on me and acts like I'm
Yeah.
the enemy
Let,
denying
let,
it.
let me add some perspective to this because we're having a good conversation. So to be fair, Luke, I'm gonna give you 40 seconds to just finish what you got to say because while I was looking the verses up, there was time running. So say what you got to say, 40
Okay.
seconds, then I'll go.
Okay. Well, here Peter says that the women should adorn themselves like the women of old, and you can see that he says Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. That was common. Again, this women used to say, "Yes, my Lord," in every culture all around the world, not Jewish culture. This is how all submissive women acted. Servants said that to if they're working for somebody as their maid or their whatever, they would call them my lord. It's very respectful. And women don't do that anymore. Not in America, not in Europe. So you can see, guys, that these standards are fading. Women do not obey their husbands. They don't respect their husbands like they ought to. They don't adorn themselves like the women of old. And also, they don't take any pride in being hidden. Being respectful to their husbands, winning them without a word. What? Without a word? Again, Peter is emphasizing that women should be quiet, submissive. And isn't that interesting? He
All
emphasizes
right.
the
Well,
hidden person of the heart.
that's your time. That's your
All
time.
right,
So
go ahead.
let me respond. Let me respond now. I'm gonna go 2 minutes now. All right. So the context of this passage right here, which is a very good passage that this brother brought up, right, is that a woman should focus more on the inside than the outside. But it doesn't mean that a woman can't, once in a blue, look beautiful. What it's saying is, or by okay, beautiful is a woman. Okay, let me put it to you this way, because the word beautiful that can be interpreted in many ways, right? Luke might say something is beautiful that I say is not beautiful to me. Okay, so for even better context, okay, um, this doesn't mean that a woman cannot put on some lipstick in a modest fashion or wear some earrings in a modest fashion, right? The context of this is that a woman ought to submit to her husband, but the Bible also says that a man ought to submit to his wife. So again, what's the context of this? Don't It's the inside, not the outside. But if the outside isn't something that you are overly if the outside is not something that you're overly fiending over, right? To use a hood word, fiending, right? And you are good in the inside, then there's no issue with you wearing some jewelry in the outside if you're good in the inside. But if you think that you're good in the inside because of how you look in the outside, that's where this would apply. But again, so it's all context, right? Because women think that because they look beautiful, they dress beautiful, that they're good in the inside and they're rotten. But if you're good in the inside, then you know what? Put on some makeup, you're good to go. Okay. All right. Now, obviously, that probably triggered Luke a little bit because he spoke about makeup earlier. But I guess we could get into it. I'm not saying look like a clown either. You know what I'm saying? Let's be very clear. Also, Luke brought up First Corinthians chapter 14 somewhere about submission, as the law says. Um, Paul says that a woman needs to be submissive. I went over 2 minutes, but just for the sake of conversation, let me just finish this up. I'll give you some extra time, Luke, no problem. Um, it is important for a woman to submit to their husband. And again, I'm very clear that a woman shouldn't be dressed as a prostitute, but I think there are examples where a woman can be dressed modestly and they're not looking. like prostitutes. They're not looking dirty. They're not looking, you know, as some of the examples that Luke gave. And then Luke mentioned another point that I want to address. Oh
What does
man,
it mean to be dressed as a prostitute? What does that mean? Is that, can you
I
tell
would
me?
say, I would say, you know, someone that's perhaps dressed in revealing clothing. You know what I'm saying? I think there is a common understanding of what a woman not dressed appropriately is, you know? Like I think everybody knows, you know what I'm saying? Like I just don't, I just revealing clothing,
Are you sure everybody knows? Because JP, some people are perverted in their minds. Don't you think the society is very perverted? Don't you think everybody's addicted to pornography?
No, absolutely. But I think that in a church, if you truly have the Holy Spirit and you have discernment, listen, bro, I go to church and there are women that are dressed that I would say maybe perhaps a little bit over the edge. I see it, I know it, but they're perhaps everybody's in a process of sanctification. So I pray that they get there.
Well, I'm sorry, JP, but you are living in a bubble here by saying I want to reject all of history, all moral standards for all time, and just whatever I think now is all that matters. But you can't live that way. You can't even have the Bible without history. You can't have definitions of Greek words without people using those words in history to tell you their context and how they're used. For instance,
Yeah,
you believe that the word catacalypto means a veil, right? Some kind of veil?
no, yeah. Again, brother, as I said, I go by the context.
You
So
can't figure it out with the context. You need history to know what catacalypto means,
no,
JP.
but it's telling us what you need that particular thing for in order, and it tells you that if you don't pray, if you pray without it, if you prophesy without it, that's when you're in sin, and it highlights those two particular things, and it's in the context of the church, and so that's why I'm saying, given the context. But go ahead,
Okay,
Luke. Go ahead.
let's do the context thing. I'm going to be real
All
specific with the context using an example. Okay,
right, okay,
in
so let me
Genesis,
go there.
it uses the exact same word, catacalypto. Uses the past tense version, cataclips. Or yeah, here let me pull it up here. It's Genesis 38, 14 through 15.
And Luke, I'm about to get ready to start wrapping up. So,
That's
how?
okay. That's okay.
Yeah,
Okay, it's the exact same word though.
yeah.
It's This is Tamar in the Old Testament. Exact same
Okay.
word that Paul is using.
All right, no
Are you
worries.
ready?
No, absolutely, brother. Go ahead.
Okay, she took off of her the garments of her widowhood and covered herself with her veil and painted her face and sat in the gate of Enaim, and which is by the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown up and she wasn't given him as a wife. And when Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot, for she covered her face and he knew her not. So this word for covered is catacalypto. It's the exact same word that Paul uses. And I know there's some really perverted people out there that would dare suggest the reason he thinks that she's a prostitute is not because she painted her face, but because she covered her face with a veil. That would be such a disgusting thing. I mean, if you want to burn in hell, you could say that, but you would be accusing Rebecca and Solomon's wife and Susanna and all the women in the Old Testament who veil their faces of being prostitutes because they're covering their faces. That is clearly not the thing that made her look like a prostitute. It's the fact that she painted herself. So
No, yeah,
let's
and look,
let's deal with specific context here, JP. This is the exact same word that Paul is using. So
yeah.
what do you think?
So look, look. I'm gonna respond to that real quick, and then I'll let you get the last word because we're an hour in, and I'm in New York City, which is it's already 11 o'clock over here. But let me respond to that real quick, and then I'll give you 3 minutes to do a closing statement. All right. So my response to that would be, Luke, if what you're trying to insinuate is that makeup is makes you look like a prostitute, given that particular context, I would like to see what kind of makeup they were wearing, because there is makeup that you can look like a prostitute in, and there is makeup that you don't look like a prostitute wearing. So I've seen a woman in the streets of New York City wearing makeup that I go, they're a prostitute. And I've seen women wearing makeup in New York where I go, this is a Pentecostal, right? Like she got a little couple of blushes
That's
here
your
and
low
there.
standards. That's your
Yeah,
non-existent
but
standards.
I would say that not every shoe fits all,
You live
because
in New
there are
York.
clothing. I would say this: there's clothing that'll make you look a particular way, and there are clothing that'll make you look a particular way in another fashion. So everything. can be used for a particular thing and a particular purpose. So I would have to go by what kind of makeup she was wearing that happened. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I would do. But as I'm a man of my word, you got 3 minutes to close, my brother. So go ahead, get your closing statement.
Well, if you want to have the discussion again sometime, we can talk about veiling all the time. And I
No,
think,
absolutely. Look, this is my second channel, so obviously we only got 20 concurrent viewers here, anyways. But you could keep this video
good, they
yourself.
won't hear that horrible burp. Please forgive me. Everybody heard me do the
I
burp.
could edit that out. I could
Listen. Oh,
edit.
thank you. Because I'm sitting here, I'm muting myself. Click. And I'm going. Oh, I'm so gassy. I gotta let this out. And I did not know
No,
anybody would
I
hear
could
it.
edit. I could edit that out. Don't
Thank
worry
you. I
about it.
appreciate it. Well, I can prove from the Old Testament that cataclipto does mean face veil. Am I all by myself in here?
Yeah, 3 minutes closing
I
statement.
see. You gave me the big screen. Um, yeah, cataclipto does mean a face veil. The word occurs in the Old Testament many times, and the word occurs in Greek history many hundreds of times, and I can show you examples of that. And we should use historical sources to verify what words mean, especially if it's only occurring once or twice in the New Testament. You have to refer to Old Testament. You have to refer to history to see how it's used. Paul is writing to Greeks in the Greek language. You cannot take the Greek language and say we're going to redefine these words, we're going to redefine the context. The Greeks own these words. These words are defined by them. They'll tell you what a calyptra or calypto means, and that's a veil, and it covers the face. And when Paul says that you ought to do what is according to nature, and that hair is given to a woman as a natural veil, then you should listen to that. You should look at what is naturally done all around the world. He's telling you to. He's telling you you're allowed to look at the customs of the world and the customs of the other churches. And JP and everybody, you are making a huge conspiracy theory, a massive conspiracy theory to say we can read the church fathers writing in the 100s and 200s, right after this, very close to this time period, and see that they're all veiling the face in Corinth and all around the rest of the world. You would be making this huge theory to say, I think they just suddenly all changed their practice. And it's even worse for you if you acknowledge that the Jews were all veiling prior to that, and that the Greeks were all veiling the face prior to that. So you have this whole history of them veiling prior to it, and a whole history of them veiling, after that. And you think in the middle, Paul is commanding some brand new kind of veil that never existed before or something? No. Paul is clearly upholding the standard that was already there, and he was simply saying in 1 Corinthians 11, women, do not take off your veil when you go to church and you're praying and prophesying like the Greeks do. The Greek women would take off their veil during their ecstatic rites. They'd go into these frenzied states, they'd shake their hair. There are a lot of quotes about it if you want to see the quotes about it. So sometimes you really do need help from history to know what in the world these specific things are about. That's for the Old Testament and New Testament. There are many times where some reference will make no sense unless you have a cultural understanding. How much more time do I have? Is that all my time? That I'm good.
No, you have a minute.
Oh, I got one more minute. Okay. Well, yeah, my argument is Old Testament says women ought to be veiling, and if you know what that word means, you know it's a face veil. All the Jews, in addition to that, if you look at like Philo of Alexandria, you can read the Talmud, you can read other Jewish sources. They're all saying face should be covered and the entire body. They say no skin should be showing. In the Talmud, it says a handbreadth of skin is nakedness. And then you can read all the early Christians' writings. You can read Paul saying it. You can look at the entire practice of the entire civilized world for many centuries, all the way up until the Protestant Reformation. Then you can read all the Protestants from the 1500s to the late 1800s saying Paul is referring to a face veil. And then you can read the heretical writings from the first few centuries if you want. Even they take this seriously. Even they say if women unveil themselves, they're committing a very serious sin. They're exchanging garments. And we can talk about it more sometime.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Luke. Appreciate it. You're welcome anytime, brother.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Farewell.
Drive safely.
Thank you.
All right. That was a good conversation. I guess I'll give my 3 minute closing. Um, and if anybody has anything to say, I guess they can try to come up and say their piece for a little bit. But let me give my little closing. My closing statement is this. I have 3 minutes. Early church doesn't dictate. Uh, the early church doesn't dictate what I believe. Okay, so I'm a man that needs to see it in scripture. If it's not in scripture,